I will say to start having a daily practice that connects you to your heart, whatever that means for you, to create a space for you to meet with yourself, to be in silence, to cry, to put or create something beautiful there, so you can start getting more in touch with your feminine, with your sweetness, with your flow. I think that practice comes through that ritual that we can do and make, and cultivate a lot of things in us and help us to do this journey that I mentioned from the head to the heart. Because as Angelina Martinez, one of my beautiful mentors and teachers, said, women in little towns in Mexico, for example, give birth with their hearts. And that's why they give birth very easy and fast. But women in the city, sometimes they forget the heart and give birth or try to give birth with their mind. And so I will say how to go and start having a practice, whatever that means, you know, start connecting with what makes you feel safe and feel more intuitive.
Trust your instincts and don't be afraid to ask for help when you need it. I know particularly with Black women that we are expected. I even had a mama tell me, like, oh, I don't ask for help because I know I'm supposed to do this by myself. I'm supposed to be, and my question to her was, who told you that? And I know that society tells you that, but that wasn't a thing. This, birth and parenting and all the things that we need to do in life, like, we did things in tribes, we did things with the support of our elders and our siblings and whoever else we did. And so yeah, having to do it on your own, no, you don't. Always reach out.
For pregnancy, my best advice is that due dates are for suckers, or the due dates are for doctors. Like, babies show up when they're going to show up. Labor starts when it's going to start, and these timetables are for doctors. It's I mean, there is some good science to it, but it's still so much that we don't know. And someone's body may always go into labor at 39, 40 weeks. Someone else's body goes into labor at 42 weeks. So, and don't share your due date. Don't do it.
Listen to positive birth stories. That was very key for me.
Remembering that you hire the doctor, you're not graced by their presence at your birth. That you can fire them if you need to, that you can ask them to leave, that you can tell them no. No is a full sentence, and anything beyond what they do after you say no is assault. So be willing to be there and step up for yourself.
One is keep it simple. I know that there are so many baby lists out there and saying you need all these millions of things. You don't, I promise. So just focus on the simple stuff, which is feeding and changing. That's it. Everything else doesn't matter, I promise. The second one is make sure you read your ingredients. I know it can be a bit of work, especially when they start eating and stuff. You really want to, if it takes that little bit of time, take that little bit of time, because it really does make a difference. Even, especially if you're breastfeeding, make sure that you're eating correctly. Just it seems, I know it is a bit of work, but it is worth it. Putting on your skin, in your skin, it's important. And like with baby food making, there's some really cool gadgets that have come out that speed up the process. So for working moms, it is possible, I promise. And then the last thing is kind of like it's two parts. Like one, make sure you've got your community, whether it's your hubby, your wife, your mum, like whoever it is, like a couple of people who you can call at 2 a.m. that won't get upset, because you might be up at 2 a.m, really tired, just crying, and you really just need a hug. And then the second sort of part to that is, you know, as new moms, you're probably going to maybe get a ton of advice, but listen to your gut, because honestly, like sometimes mother's gut is sometimes more right than pediatricians and what all the other experts are saying. And yeah, those would be my 3 tips.
My best advice is take it slow. Take it as slow as possible. And by that, I mean, don't think that you have to do everything, that you have to get everything ready at a certain time. Really ask yourself if it's really truly you that feels that something needs to be done, or is it a social construct that is telling you that it needs to get done in this certain way, right? And so by slowing down, you can really get in touch with your soul seat, your soul longing, and you can get in touch with your heart, you know, instead of being in the mind so much. Because what I see a lot of pregnant mamas is they get stuck in the mind and worry, and they don't drop down to the heart. And then in the heart is where we can feel trust and gratitude. And then that's what allows us to surrender to the process of pregnancy, of birth, and then the eventual postpartum and parenthood. So if we don't slow down our thoughts, our actions, then we can't listen to what we truly need. And that's my best advice. Slow it down.
I would say for pregnancy and birth, be flexible with your plan, because that is one thing that, you know, with my first birth, I was like, I'm going to do this, and I have the birth ball, and my husband's going to massage my back while I rock on the birth ball. And, you know, we got to the actual, you know, contractions and in the hot, and I was like, nope, you know what? Don't touch me. Like you're touching too soft. You're not touching in the right place. Like, it's like, go sit in the corner. I want you there. I want you present. But I have to focus. Like I need my energy and focus. I have my point on the wall that I'm focusing on. I don't want anyone touching me. And that was a complete change from what I had originally thought with my birth plan. I didn't want to have any sort of like medicine. I didn't want to have like an epidural, or, you know, I didn't want to have anything like that. And then after 24 hours of labor, I was still 1 centimeter dilated. And I was having crazy contractions every 2 minutes, and I was in so much pain that I was disappointed in myself after that birth. I was like, man, I didn't do it the way that I wanted. And so I would say, give yourself some grace and be flexible, because you never know what's going to happen or how you're going to feel once you're actually in the birthing room of what you're going to want, and just go with it, and don't beat yourself up like over whatever decisions that you make. So that would be my pregnancy and childbirth piece of advice. For postpartum, I would say the same kind of thing. Like just give yourself the grace to rest, you know, acknowledge that you've been through a trauma. Your body has been through a 9-month trauma. You've had 9 months of, I mean, they're wonderful, but they're little parasites inside, growing inside you. They're taking everything. They're taking all your nutrients. When I was pregnant with the twins, I used to have to keep like balance bars in my bedside table, because I would wake up at 2 a.m. starving because they were hungry, and I would just like sit and like you be gnawing the balance bars in the middle of the night, like chugging some water. So, you know, I would say like give yourself some time to rest, whatever that looks like for you, and whatever you find relaxing and whatever you find comforting. I would say do that for yourself. Like give yourself that gift if you can.
Best advice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think, first of all, be comfortable with their caregiver, you know, and sort of discuss all your thoughts and fears. I think that's important to get you prepared for delivery. Here, the internet is wonderful, you know, pros and cons, but boy, there's so much information on the internet these days that if you're interested in healthy pregnancy, lots of information there. And some of it is easy to navigate and others are more difficult. I think genetic screening is a more difficult aspect of it. So you can read about it, but your caregiver, I think, can help there. In terms of healthy lifestyle, I think you get a lot. Now we have to be concerned about misinformation, going off in a tangent on things that are a little bit more controversial. And I think that's where your healthcare giver can help along with that. So best advice is seek healthcare, educate yourself. And there are lots of things in your lifestyle that can improve the outcome of pregnancy and healthy, and I encourage you to follow that. Not easy sometimes, as we know, but most patients, they want to do the right thing. So for most, it's an easy sell.
To pause, to take a moment, to put your feet on the ground, to connect to your most inner self, no matter what role you are holding in this process. So just allow yourself that moment and that connection, and to exhale it and to move from there.
My best advice would be to advocate for yourself and make sure the people around you know what you want. And it's okay, you know, your mother's not on the same page as you. It's okay not to have her in the birth. So if they're not going to be your biggest fan during one of the most, you know, challenging times and beautiful times, but also hard times with having a baby, then it's okay to create space to have your own little bubble. And I think, you know, that some people may feel the pressure of family and friends to do what they think is right or do what traditionally has happened. And listen to your intuition. It's okay for you to advocate for yourself. That would be my biggest piece of advice.
My teachings have always been that, you know, a woman is a walking prayer. And, you know, when you call for the spirit of your baby, you every day, every sunrise, every sunset, you're praying for that spirit to travel, because, you know, just as our sky woman traveled a gazillion miles to get here from another world, that spirit is coming from another place too. So you're walking, you know, you're a walking prayer, and you're praying for 10 fingers, 10 toes, 2 eyes, 2 ears. You're praying for the safe passage of your baby from that spirit world.
To become embodied, you know, to focus like a lot more on like the internal preparation and the internal invitation than in like, because it can be really stressful, you know, trying to get prepared for this like big arrival. And we often forget to just like slow down and connect to our babies and get embodied and really listen, take this opportunity to like experience these really precious moments where it's just like our babies in our womb. And I mean, there's like a literal heart in your womb, you know. I mean, if that doesn't get much more healing than that, you know. So like take that opportunity to remember that. And of course, you know, yeah, just get connected, just get embodied. There's a lot of practical advice that I think we all get as women, and I think I'd like to leave it at that.
My best advice for pregnancy, birth, and postpartum, and I know this is really tough because I'm trying to practice this in my own life, is to be open to the journey itself. And I know it sounds really broad, but I think to be open to change, to shifts. And also, I feel like my other piece of advice would be to use this opportunity to get to know thyself, because I think that is one of the core pieces that so many women and families struggle with. Because if you don't know what your own beliefs are, you don't know yourself, when you go into situations where the change or the conflict happens, there's no solid ground within yourself. So if you're not grounded in your beliefs, then that becomes really muddy waters to know like why you want something, why you don't want something, but also being open to the idea that I really do believe this. No tool in the birth toolbox is innately bad. So when you hear epidural, vacuum, cesarean birth, like all of these things that were like formula, like pacifiers, all of these things that we're told of as being shameful sometimes in birth, depending upon who's using the language. It depends on which the intention on which the care provider or the intention of the mother or the person choosing to have that tool used during birth. So I really like to welcome families and women and people to understand that for me, what's the most important piece of advice is to not like to try to be as open-minded as possible and to know yourself and to know why you believe certain things. Because I feel like when you start to peel back the layers of those onions, a lot of times we realize what we believe. We're like, you don't even believe that. Or I'm like, I believe that because Phoebe on Friends told me this is true. I don't, whatever it is, you know what I mean? Like, we realize it's almost so ridiculous sometimes why we really, I believe it's because of this. Well, I'm going to discard that because that was really not on solid ground. Or we realize that it is a real core belief that we believe in and that we are willing to fight for that in some way.
Well, first off, I have to say, they don't tell you like what, like, they don't tell you how difficult and how jarring postpartum will be. It's not that, oh, you know, if you prepare enough, then you're going to be fine. No, you're still going to experience like a complete destruction of who you are as a person. And you're going to have to rebuild that identity, like not to, you know, bring fear or anything into this, but literally you have to deconstruct your entire idea of who you are, because once you're a mother, once you go through, you know, the birth experience, you're a completely different person. You know, actually the neurological pathways in your brain are completely rewired. You have different parts of your brain that wake up too. So then you have to become familiar with these new aspects of yourself. They also don't tell you just how much support you need after the baby is born. Straight up 40-day rest period, I think it should be, you know, really spoken about, just the importance of taking those first 40 days to rest after giving birth and not feeling the social pressure to jump back and go back into society and act like nothing happened too, you know? So yeah, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be challenging. No one can prepare you for the lack of sleep, for the over touch and overstimulation of the baby, of everything, right? Our nervous system is completely like at its edge, because also we just get really scared too of like, how am I going to be able to read this baby? I have no manual. I don't know what to do here, right? And all the advice in the world just does not prepare you for what the experience is going to teach you. Our body, what happens with the options that I'm taking. They don't tell us that the decisions that you make are also your responsibility, and you have the opportunity, because there's no going back. There's really no going back. So when you listen, and if you feel that something is okay, it's not okay, something that it feels off, you need to reconsider your decision. And there's no right or wrong, or there's no late time to make and change your decisions. You have to be in tune with what, and we're changing all the time. So they don't tell us that you really need to be really informed and that you have to know. It's not fair for your baby and for your family, for yourself, to give all the responsibility to others, to the doctors, to the hospital, to the midwife. You have to own your birth. You need to understand what's happening, what are the protocols, what do you resonate with and what you don't resonate with. And in that sense, then you go to your practice, and in that space, you take decisions. Feeling that connection. What resonates with me? What is it that I need? What I'm not feeling okay? What feels off? Where I'm not being listened? Who is not listening to me? What's happening here? So we need to take responsibility, and that is not said. We are taught to just obey and pay attention to what it says, and we don't question. So we need to question, because this is our process and we are responsible for our babies. So it is very important to not go crazy, but to find the right tools, the right sources, and to have a good criteria to where look for information. I will say that having a doula is so important, because if they are so resourceful and they can guide you, or having conversation with birth workers where you can understand what path and what options that you have.
There are many things that they don't tell you, and starting or going back to where we started, and as this is it's your birth, it's your family, and you have the right to stand in your power with whatever your choices are around your birth. And I guess the other thing that they don't tell you, that I tell my families all the time, like, you can do this. Like, this is, like, you have the tools, and you can get more tools. Like, it is, you can do this.
That you will be birthing your heart.
Yeah.
And the magnitude of that, to trust that you don't understand it until it's there, but to also trust that you will be held in that. Your heart will be held in this, that there's a destiny line that will be followed. Yeah.
Oh, well, the first thing is they don't tell us about our bodies, right? So we don't have comprehensive sex education in our schools, and most of the time not in our families. And so many people enter pregnancy without knowing anything about their bodies. So that would be my first thing, is to learn about your body, how it works, what your nutritional needs actually are, what happens and changes in pregnancy, and what birth and postpartum recovery is like. I think the biggest lie out of all this stuff is postpartum. Like, that whole bounce back thing, like, come on, they lying to you. Postpartum recovery is at least a year. That's what they don't tell you.
For my personal experience, the two that I was like, really? They don't tell you this? Is it's really common to barf during transition. So don't eat a lot right before you're going to transition. I personally hate barfing. So that I was like really upset that no one warned me about that. And then number two is postpartum pooping can be very scary and painful as well. And there's lots of different reasons why, but just know like that, it's not that cool when you're caught off guard about your first postpartum poop. So just know that like it could be scary and it can be painful. Keep up on your stool softeners to just try to get your poop as soft as you possibly can keep it. And then if you take a little roll of toilet paper and you apply a little bit of pressure to your perineum. So I dropped my pelvic model over here. If you take a little toilet paper roll and you apply a little, like very mild pressure to your perineum when you poop, it's going to provide a little bit of support to usually where you've had a little tear and repair, and can help give you a little bit of confidence in your body to get a poop out, and also decrease any pain. And then the other one is the 6-week postpartum clearance visit. What I just wish all the language around it was completely changed. But what they don't tell you is what they're actually clearing you for. And what they're actually clearing you for is that you're not dying, and that you are healing on a typical time frame. And so at that point, you can technically have sex and you can technically exercise without like severely injuring or killing yourself. That's what they're clearing you for. What it doesn't mean is that your body is ready to have sex or even capable of having pleasurable sex, or that your body is even remotely close to going for a run, because it is just when your tissues have either shown that they're healing within typical time frame or healed, and then only then can you really start the rebuild process to then prepare your body for single leg impact activities like running. So what I find is a lot of people come out of that visit feeling bad that they don't want to have sex because they're cleared. And then if they do have sex, then, and it's painful, it's a horrible experience, they feel like their body has disappointed them because it's supposed to be fine because they're cleared. Same thing with like they go for a run and then it feels miserable and they're peeing everywhere and they're like, wait, I was cleared. But it's just that initial, like, you're not dying. Is what you're getting cleared for at your 6-week visit. And that the process of rebuilding can really begin at that point. I like to tell people 1 year is really the timeline to be looking at for feeling good in your body. It really depends on like whether you've been able to do a conscious rebuild along that year, but generally speaking, like looking out a year is going to give you a much better timeline for reasonable expectations for your body.
Great. That you're not alone. Even if you feel like you are not alone. There's so many women out there, even if you can't connect or find a group, even on Instagram, they have all these pages of support. There's messages that are positive, encouraging you and helping you navigate that. And so if that's where you start, that's great. You know, if you can connect with somebody that's a professional, that's even better. But we know that early intervention is key. We know that postpartum perinatal mood disorders can last up to a year or two. With early intervention, it doesn't have to be that way. And so I would encourage you to reach out to people so that you don't have to struggle in silence.
How sacred it is. That it is a ceremony, you know? Yeah, they really don't tell us that. I mean, I'm really grateful for like the birth keeping community where I think making noise for now, and that's singing songs, and that's really good. But since obstetrics became like the main, you know, way of getting maternity care in the United States, like they don't really tell us how sacred and special this is and to connect to our babies. And yeah. And as far as postpartum, get community, you know, they don't tell us to make sure we make a tapestry of support, and we're going to need it because we were never meant to do this alone, any of it. We're supposed to be in community. So yeah.
Every birth is courageous. That no matter how you birth, you have birthed a baby. This is how you brought your children into the world, and you did the most regardless of what that birth looks like, because you go into birth not being able to predict the outcome. So that birth is courageous no matter what it looks like.
I think in all things that we do, as childbearing people, we need to give ourselves more grace. We need to give ourselves grace in the hard parts of pregnancy, grace in the dark moments of labor, grace in the time it takes us to heal on our postpartum. And that can be years, depending on what that looks like. I think we need to give ourselves more pats on the back and tell ourselves that we're doing the best that we can for these children that we're bringing into the world and that we're raising, and that we are there for a reason, that we have these children for a reason, and that we are the best that they need.
Not going to sleep when the baby's sleeping, no matter how many times people tell you that. It is great advice if you listen to it, but it most likely won't happen. And my advice, like postpartum in particular, is regardless if you're breastfeeding, chest feeding, or bottle feeding, have a basket full of snacks and water and everything next to you, and have people do your chores before they hold the baby. So that would be like, you're just not going to sleep. There's still, life still goes on. There's still a lot of things to do, even when you're home. So, take your time and like get other people to do that, because if you don't, you're definitely not going to sleep, and you want to be the best person you are for your baby. So, but it's difficult. It's difficult. It's good advice, but I didn't follow it with my 8-year-old, and I wish I did. So
that you always have a choice, even when you feel you don't. There's always a choice to be made. And sometimes it's not as grand as we believe it to be, even if it's for a mom this comes to mind a lot, when a mom has the journey from maybe home birth to having a transfer to a birthplace to the hospital, to then having another transfer of birth to a cesarean birth. Like, this can be a really challenging journey for a mom. And I feel like just knowing that even in that moment before her cesarean birth, that she has an active choice to choose to like push her baby, or even if it's something really small, it's an active choice to choose to not feel as if something is just happening to her. But, even if it's that small, I feel like a mom always knowing she has a choice to make in birth, even if it's big as like on the day of, I do not feel comfortable, I'm going to check out of this hospital, wherever she's birthing center. I'm going to tell my midwife, like, we are breaking up. Like, it's just not working for her, that she always.
The head for this is that pain is part of the process. So there's some disadvantage, for example, of having an epidural too early. And I think one of the concepts that I think it's important to discuss is that pain is not all bad, especially if the pain or labor pain is leading to what you want, which is progress of labor and dilation. It's not all bad. You don't have to have a labor with the absolute free of pain. I guess it's easy for me to say I'm not having the pain, so I'll accept that criticism. But to recognize that labor is a very natural process. So I think it'll help if you understand that the pain is not dangerous pain, that nothing bad has happened to you nor the baby, that pain may be a little bit more tolerable, both in the beginning of labor, when allows one not to have the epidural too early, or not at all in some instances. And then in the process of pushing, I think it makes the pushing much more effective. But if your expectation is that you shouldn't have any pain and that you're going to push simply with coaching, I think that's a much more difficult thing to be pushing when nature is encouraging you to push than when you have to be completely numb because you don't want to have pain and someone has to tell you when to push. I think it's two entirely different things. So I think that's what the tough news that I think sometimes we encourage you to listen to, that pain is part of the process. And in fact, if there's such a thing of good pain, that's the one area where pain is actually good. So don't be too afraid of labor. Women have been doing it successfully for years. And, the whole process of giving birth is a wonderful, natural miracle most times. So I think, yes, I'd like to leave that message at the end, that labor is a very natural process, and don't be too afraid of the pain part of it.